They were involved with someone else. Not because you were less or not enough, not because you could be replaced easily, but because something inside them was not ready to handle what felt real and honest. And now they are carrying something they can no longer push away or hide inside themselves. What they want to express is not simple. It is not easy for them, because while they were physically present in another situation, emotionally a part of them never fully detached from you. That truth has slowly become something they cannot deny anymore. Have you ever felt a connection that never truly ended, even when everything outside of it looked finished, like something stayed open in the background of your mind, quietly alive? That is exactly where they have been stuck, not in the past fully, but in a space where truth was delayed, not erased. Real connection does not just vanish. It waits, it lingers, and with time it demands to be understood clearly without confusion. And now that feeling is rising again, stronger than before. Stay with this. There is more unfolding than it seems. They chose what felt safe at that time instead of what felt deeply true. They moved toward what was familiar, not what was calling them from within. They held on to comfort because it felt easier than facing something uncertain and intense. And slowly, they started believing comfort meant peace, even when something inside kept questioning that belief. They stayed in situations that did not demand too much from them emotionally. No pressure, no deep reflection, just routine, just control. But deep down, there was always a quiet awareness that something meaningful had been left behind, something that would have required courage they did not have in that moment. And that awareness did not disappear. It stayed. In quiet hours, in pauses between thoughts, in moments when everything became silent and honest. You know that feeling when your mind gets too quiet and the truth starts speaking louder. That is what happened to them. They could not fully escape it anymore. Keep watching this unfold, because this is where the truth starts getting heavier. Over time, they began to notice something was missing from their life experience. Everything looked fine on the outside, but inside it felt limited, like they were only partially living their own story. They avoided deeper emotions, avoided difficult questions, avoided anything that might force them to face what they were truly feeling. And slowly, this created distance within themselves, not from others, but from their own inner truth. What they had with someone else may have looked stable, but it did not carry the same emotional depth they once experienced with you. That connection left something behind in their system, something unresolved, and unresolved feelings do not disappear just because time passes. They stay quiet for a while, then return in subtle ways, in thoughts, in memories, in moments they did not expect. At some point, they stopped lying to themselves, not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly and honestly. They realized they were never fully present where they chose to stay. A part of them remained unfinished with you, and once a person sees that clearly, they cannot unsee it again. Something inside them has already shifted permanently, and now the real question is what they will do with that truth. And that collapse brings both discomfort and a strange kind of clarity into their mind. It forces them to sit with what they avoided for so long and finally face the emotional weight they kept delaying every single day. There is no simple escape from it once the awareness fully settles in their thoughts. It just stays there, quietly but constantly. What you need to understand above everything else is this one truth. None of this was ever a reflection of your worth or your value as a person. It was always about their own emotional readiness, their fear, and their ability to deal with what they were feeling at that time. You were never the problem in this story. You were never less. You simply met someone who was not prepared to stand fully in the depth you were offering, and now they are facing the outcome of their own decisions, carrying everything they postponed, avoided, and left unfinished inside themselves. Whether they speak it out or stay silent, that weight remains part of their inner world. Not a dramatic return, not a sudden confession, but a slow realization that keeps settling deeper each day. Stay with this, because the truth here goes deeper than surface emotions. You were not replaced by someone better or more valuable. You crossed paths with someone who did not yet have the inner strength to meet you where you truly were. And now they are standing in the result of their own choices, holding everything they once pushed away. The emotional consequences are not loud, but they are steady. They feel it in quiet moments, in pauses, in the spaces where distractions no longer work. None of this came from your lack. It came from their fear, their hesitation, and their limits at that time. The distance, the inconsistency, the silence, all of it was rooted in what they could not face within themselves. And now that fear has changed shape, it has turned into awareness they cannot ignore anymore. It sits in their mind, repeating itself without needing words. It shows them what they avoided and what they were not ready to hold. Keep watching this shift, because this is where understanding starts to fully settle in. Over time, they start to realize something deeper. Their life may look normal on the surface, but internally something feels incomplete, like they were only partially present in their own experience. They avoided emotional depth, avoided difficult truths, avoided anything that required real vulnerability, and slowly that avoidance created distance within themselves, not just from others, but from their own feelings. What they had elsewhere may look stable from the outside, but it does not carry the same emotional impact that they once felt with you. That connection left something behind in their awareness that never fully closed, and unfinished emotions do not disappear just because time passes. They return in quiet waves, in thoughts they did not expect, in memories they try not to revisit, in moments of stillness where everything becomes too clear to ignore. At some point they stop pretending, not in one sudden moment but gradually, as honesty starts replacing denial. They realize a part of them never fully moved on from what they had with you. And once that truth is seen clearly, it cannot be unseen again. Something inside them has already shifted in a lasting way, and now they are left with that awareness, whether they are ready for it or not. Not as something replaceable, but as a meaningful connection they were not ready to hold at that time. That truth does not fade for them. It stays in their mind and quietly shapes how they think, how they reflect, and how they respond in future situations where real emotional depth shows up again. Nothing feels the same after that awareness. What comes next is no longer driven by confusion or emotional guessing for them. It slowly turns into conscious decision-making, clarity in action, and awareness of consequences. And this is where everything starts to feel different. Your choices matter now. Your self-respect matters more than anything. Stay with this, because this part is about your direction, not just their realization. Take a moment and sit with all of this fully. Do not rush past it. Let it settle in your mind. Feel what has already passed and also what still might open up ahead in your journey. Trust your inner instincts, that quiet voice inside you that has been there even when things felt unclear. You already know deep down what feels right and what does not. You already understand what you deserve in connection, in honesty, and in emotional presence. And now, with full awareness of both their process and your own growth, the next step can be taken with calm thinking, steady confidence, and strong self-respect. On the outside, someone may look completely focused elsewhere, fully committed in another direction, or emotionally distant from what once existed. But internally, emotionally, and psychologically, a part of them can still remain connected to something they never fully understood or resolved within themselves. This is not something simple or one-layered. It is about human attachment, fear, timing, and emotional development that unfolds slowly over time. Stay with this because the truth gets deeper here. What makes situations like this so powerful is the way fear silently influences decisions. Fear of emotional exposure, fear of losing control, fear of being fully seen, and even fear of their own feelings can quietly push a person away from what they actually feel inside. In those moments, they may choose other distractions or connections, not because they are stronger or more meaningful, but because they feel easier to manage emotionally. Yet the original connection never fully disappears from their inner world. It stays in thoughts, in quiet comparisons, in memories they do not openly share. It continues shaping how they interpret love, closeness, and emotional safety without them always realizing it. And over time, regret slowly builds, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet realization that grows stronger when life becomes still and distractions fade. They begin to see what they avoided, what they delayed, and what they were not ready to face honestly. And once that clarity appears, it does not leave easily. It becomes part of how they understand their past and how they approach anything meaningful moving forward. There is often a quiet difference between what they show on the outside and what they actually feel within their heart. This difference is not always something planned or intentional, but over time it becomes more visible as awareness slowly grows and inner questions begin to rise on their own. At the same time, the person who once asked for honesty, depth, and real emotional presence is also evolving through their own journey. They are no longer stuck in the same emotional space. They are becoming more stable, more self-aware, and more confident in their own worth as a human being. They are learning to rely on their own judgment, to trust their instincts, and to move forward with clearer direction in every step they take. Stay with this, because this shift changes everything in a deeper way than it first appears. This growth on both sides becomes important because it prevents the repetition of old emotional patterns that once created distance and confusion between them. It creates space where any future interaction, if it ever happens, is no longer driven by emotional dependence, uncertainty, or confusion. Instead, it would be shaped by awareness, emotional balance, and a clearer understanding of what truly matters in real connection. Another truth that slowly becomes clear in this process is that emotional presence is not only about physical closeness. Someone can be physically present with another person, yet emotionally still carry something unresolved from the past. That inner presence does not always show on the surface, but it appears quietly in thoughts, in memories, and in unspoken comparisons that happen without control or intention. And over time, this inner awareness becomes harder to ignore. Keep watching this closely, because this is where emotional truth starts to settle. In the end, everything returns to awareness, growth, and a truth that cannot be easily erased. What was once unclear has now become easier to see. What was once avoided has now been understood more honestly by them. They have faced their hesitation, their fear, and the decisions they made during that period of life. And that understanding has changed the way they see both the past and themselves. At the same time, you have also grown into someone who no longer depends on mixed signals, confusion, or emotional uncertainty to understand your value. You have learned to protect your peace, trust your instincts, and stand firm in your self-respect without needing validation from anyone else. What this creates is not a story of chasing or waiting, but a clear realization of what was real and what it required from both sides. You represented something genuine, something meaningful, something that required courage to fully hold. And even if that realization came later for them, it still matters in their awareness now. But your life does not pause for anyone's delayed understanding. You continue forward with strength, clarity, and a deeper understanding of what you deserve and what you will no longer allow in your space. So what remains is simple and steady for you. Stay grounded in your truth and trust the growth you have built over time. Let your choices come from clarity, not from old emotions or lingering uncertainty. What is truly meant for you will meet you with the same honesty, presence, and effort you have always carried within yourself. And anything that cannot match that level will naturally fade away without force or struggle. There is often a quiet difference between what they show on the outside and what is actually happening inside their emotional world. On the surface, everything can look controlled, normal, even stable, but inside there can be a slow shift that builds over time as awareness starts to grow and inner questions begin to rise without warning. This is not always intentional. It is something that develops naturally when emotions are not fully processed or expressed. At the same time, the person who once asked for honesty, clarity, and real emotional presence is also not the same anymore. They are evolving, becoming more grounded, more aware of their own emotional patterns, and more certain about their value as a person. They are no longer in the same emotional space where confusion had power over their decisions. Instead, they are learning to trust their instincts, to listen to their inner voice, and to move forward with more stability and self-respect in every direction they take. Stay with this. Because this shift is not small, it changes the entire direction of how they see life and connection moving forward. This growth on both sides becomes deeply important because it naturally breaks the cycle of old emotional patterns that once created distance, confusion, and mixed signals between them. It creates space for something very different if any future interaction ever happens. That space is no longer built on emotional dependence, uncertainty, or unfinished feelings. Instead, it is shaped by awareness, emotional maturity, and a clearer understanding of what real connection actually requires from both people involved. Another truth that slowly becomes more visible in this process is that emotional presence is not limited to physical closeness. Someone can be physically present in a completely different direction in life, yet emotionally still carry something unresolved from a past connection within them. This presence does not always show directly, but it appears in subtle ways like thoughts that return without invitation, memories that resurface in quiet moments, and silent comparisons that happen without conscious control. Over time, these inner patterns become harder to ignore because they start shaping how a person feels about new experiences, even when they try to move forward completely. Keep watching this closely, because this is where emotional awareness starts to become unavoidable. In the end, Everything always returns to awareness, truth, and personal growth that cannot be reversed once it is fully understood. What once felt unclear or confusing begins to take a more defined shape in their mind. What was once avoided or pushed aside is now seen with more honesty and acceptance. They have faced their hesitation, their emotional fear, and the choices they made when they were not ready to act differently. That process has changed how they view their own past and how they understand emotional responsibility in a deeper way. At the same time, you are also not the same person you were before. You have grown into someone who no longer relies on mixed signals or emotional uncertainty to understand your own worth. You have learned to protect your peace, to trust your instincts more deeply, and to stand firm in your self-respect without needing constant validation from anyone else. What this creates is not a story of chasing or waiting, but a clear realization of what was real and what it required from both sides at different points in time. You represented something genuine, something meaningful, something that required emotional courage to truly hold and value. And even if that understanding came later for them, it still remains part of their awareness now. But your life does not stop or slow down for someone else's realization. You continue forward with clarity, strength, and a deeper understanding of what you deserve and what you will never again compromise on. So stay grounded in your truth, trust your growth, and let everything align naturally without forcing anything. And remember, what is meant for you will never require confusion, only clarity. There is often a quiet difference between what they show on the outside and what is actually happening within their inner emotional world. From the outside, everything can appear controlled, stable, even like nothing has changed at all, but inside there is a slow unfolding that builds over time as awareness grows and unanswered thoughts begin to rise again and again. This is not something forced or planned. It happens naturally when emotions are left unspoken and experiences are not fully resolved. At the same time, the person who once asked for honesty, clarity, and real emotional presence is also not the same version of themselves anymore. They are evolving step by step, becoming more grounded, more self-aware, and more connected to their own sense of worth. They are no longer living in emotional confusion where mixed signals could control their direction. Instead, they are learning to trust their intuition, to recognize what feels aligned, and to move forward with stronger self-respect and emotional stability. Stay with this, because this is where everything starts to shift in a deeper and more permanent way. This kind of growth on both sides becomes very important because it slowly breaks the old emotional cycles that once created distance, miscommunication, and uncertainty between them. It creates a completely different kind of space for the future, if there ever is one. That space is no longer built on confusion, emotional need, or unresolved attachment. Instead, it is shaped by awareness, maturity, and a clearer understanding of what real emotional connection actually demands from both individuals. Another deeper truth that becomes more visible through this process is that emotional presence is not limited to physical closeness alone. A person can be physically present in one direction of life, but emotionally still carry something unfinished from a past connection within them. This presence does not always announce itself loudly. It appears quietly in thought patterns, in sudden memories, in emotional comparisons that happen without intention, and in moments of silence where the mind becomes too honest to ignore. Over time, these inner experiences begin to influence how new relationships feel, even when a person believes they have fully moved forward. Keep watching this closely, because emotional truth rarely stays hidden forever. In the deeper end of this realization, everything eventually comes back to awareness, self-reflection, and growth that cannot be reversed once it fully arrives. What once felt uncertain or emotionally blurred starts to take a clearer shape in their understanding. What was once avoided or emotionally delayed begins to be seen with honesty, even if it comes with discomfort. They have had to face their hesitation, their fear of emotional depth, and the decisions they made when they were not ready to act with full clarity. And that awareness changes how they now interpret their own past in a permanent way. At the same time, you are also no longer standing in the same emotional position you once were. You have grown into someone who does not depend on confusion, mixed signals, or inconsistent behavior to recognize your own value. You have learned to protect your peace, to trust your instincts without hesitation, and to hold your self-respect as something non-negotiable. What this creates is not a story of waiting or chasing, but a full understanding of what was real, what was missing, and what it required from both sides at different emotional stages. You represented something genuine, something meaningful, something that required emotional courage, consistency, and presence to fully hold. And even if that realization arrived later for them, it still becomes part of their inner awareness now. But your life does not pause for delayed understanding. You continue forward with clarity, strength, and a deeper awareness of what you deserve and what you will never again compromise on. So stay grounded in your truth, trust your growth, and move with calm confidence. Because what is meant for you will never feel confusing. It will always feel clear, steady, and aligned from the very beginning.